Jim, I want you to come and share what God has put on your heart today about the trip. So you sit and listen to this today.
This was me in Peru. 2 weeks ago, Pastor Barry asked everybody that went on the trip, and by the way, thank you so much for letting me share my story. Everybody has a story, but thank you for letting me share mine. 2 weeks ago, he said, what would you leave behind? What would you take? That's what I would take. We went to 6 villages. I took 6 sets of recreational equipment, volleyball, soccer balls, frisbees, a football, and I would take those back again in a second. The kids went crazy over that. The second thing I would take were these 2 guys. Irma found these and bought them for me. If you turn them on low speed, they'll run for 5 hours each. It's hot over there at night. Joyce ran out of juice. She couldn't use hers, but I had this thing on my chest every night blowing air in my face, and I slept like a baby because of it. The one thing that I would not take back is this thing. It turned out that sunscreen and mosquito spray, I didn't need a long sleeve shirt. I wore short sleeve shirts like this one the whole time I was over there and was extremely comfortable. I want to read a couple of things to you. We came across this week in Bible study, but it pertains to this trip so much that I'd like to read them to you. Out of Scripture from 2 Corinthians 4:7, listen to this. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us. And then in Ephesians 2:10, this one says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works. Now listen to this, which God hath beforehand ordained that we should walk in them. Irma and I were saved over 35 years ago, and we made a commitment at that time to tithe. The commitment was to tithe on our gross income and not on our net income, and we've done so faithfully ever since. I'm only telling you that not out of pride, but just to set the stage for what happened to me while I was over there. Because what God also told us at that time was, I'm going to lay things in front of you in your life, and when I do, I want you, number 1, to recognize it, the number 2, understand it's from me, and the number 3, take action. And boy, I tell you, I've had God speak to me before. I know what it sounds like. I have never had God speak to me so many times over there about so many things, and I want to share that with you. The first thing that happened was when Barry came back 2 years ago, and I said, Barry, I want to go. Last year, I was beating him up. When are we going? When are we going? So he comes and he announces the trip this time. I want to go. Irma says, Jim, have you prayed about this? Are you going because you want to go, or are you going because God wants you to go? And I said, boy, that's a great question. I put it to 6 weeks of prayer. On a Monday night in a men's Bible study, I'm sitting there, we're studying about David. All of a sudden, God said to me, Jim, you're 75 years old. I'm not through with you yet. I've got some stuff I want you to do. You have my permission to go on this trip. I called Irma. I called Barry. I sent him a long text message, and I signed up. I think I might have been the first one. I signed up, and away we went. Now, I want to tell you that as a backdrop because when we got into Iquitos, I happened to go up to the square that night, that first night, and this is St. John's Church lit up at night. And what hit me was how it just flows and it just kind of permeates the Christian theme throughout that community. Then it hit me like a ton of bricks. The 8 of us are over there, 11 counting the ones from the night. We're over there to permeate the Christian theme throughout these villages up in the Amazon River. Now, we had a little bit of a problem. You all have heard this story probably. We couldn't get on the boat. There was a dock strike over there. The dock workers wouldn't let you get to the boats. Jose arranges for the boat to meet us way further down the river in a kind of a secret spot. We jump on this little cramped deal, and we'd ride for about an hour and a half. We get to this thing in their building. We can't get in. What happens, we got too many bags. And so we had to pay a fee. It was a bribe. We had to pay a fee. So they take the bags off of the truck. They load them onto these 3-wheelers. We jump on these things. There's Pastor Bobby and Barry, and then Joy and Barry are going to jump on one of these things, and away we go. About 2.5 miles down this concrete road, then we get to some dirt. We have to stop at the dirt. The 3-wheelers can't go through it because they're doing construction work. So what do? We grab our bags, literally, and pull those things about 1/4 mile down this dirt road until we get to the next piece of concrete. They've got some 3-wheelers there, and they take them to the bus. We made it. Only by the grace of God, we made it. That thing doesn't look like much. It's a taxi. It holds about 30 people. It goes like crazy, about 35 or 40 miles an hour on the way. It's scary how fast it goes, but it is cramped. And I was sitting on the back seat of that thing, and now 30 people, and we're only 11. I'm sitting on the back seat. I got to admit, I did have a thought. If this thing were a swamp, how do I get out of it? You know, it turns out there's an opening over the two motors, and I said, that's how I'm going out. We come pouring into Regina, the beautiful port of Regina, and we get off our luggage off of this guy, and we get on to Pastor Jose's boats, and we head off. By the way, his boats go just as fast as this one, and we're flying down the river. Now, let me point something out to you. The first trip is 4 hours in that cramped little boat up the river. We get to Regina, hot dog, we get to get off, stretch our legs. 3 more hours after that, up the river. 7 hours to get to this thing. I took this picture for a specific reason. You see that motor on the right? Guess what this church did 2 years ago? We bought a second motor for Pastor Jose and his boat. That's the motor that we paid for. Now look at the scenery out of the back of that thing. This was just another view, and then this one particular view caught my attention. There was no rain. How could there be a rainbow? There's no rain. It was the condensation coming up off the forest of the Amazon. I went, wow, isn't God interesting? So we head on down. It gets to be night as we're coming to Regina. We go by a refinery, and then we wind up in Pastor Larry's house, and we all have dinner together. Now, after dinner, I had gone out. Now, Barry and I had talked about this for weeks. I wanted to go over there to get my hands on that church. I wanted to build something. And so I knew that Larry needed some tools. So I'd gone to Home Depot, and I'd bought him all kinds of tools. And I'm pulling those things out of the bag, and I'm handing them to him, and he's sitting there. And Larry doesn't speak a whole lot of English. Some, but not a whole lot. He's sitting there. He's got a big smile on his face. Then he looks over at me, and he says, claw hammer? And it broke my heart. I'd gone to Home Depot 4 times. I'd bought a full bag of tools. I'd meant to buy a claw hammer all 4 times and forgot. On this trip, God spoke to me more times than he ever has in my life in a short period of time. Right there at that spot, he said, Jim, at Iquitos, when you're going out of the country, you buy him a claw hammer. I said, yes, sir, I'll do that. Okay, the next morning, I get up early because I wanted to go down and see this church I want to get my hands on. And I go to shave, cold water, no mirror, shaving by Braille, and I survived it. But I looked up and I said, sure it'd be nice if we had a mirror here. There's a boy sink and a girl sink. God says to me, Jim, when you're in Iquitos, I want you to buy 2 mirrors for the house. I said, okay, claw hammer, 2 mirrors, I can do that. Okay, God. So I get up and haul out, and then I have to show you this next slide. I ran into Blanca Perro. That's the dog's name, Blanca Perro, white dog. She fell in love with me. I fell in her. She was my best friend the whole time. She leads me down to the church. We go down to the church together. And it's just me and her. Everybody else is still waking up. We go down, and I see the church. Now, by the way, Larry was a boat. Then he became a carpenter over time, and then he became a pastor over time. He built this church. He built his house, 2-story. He built Jose's house, 2-story. And he built 4 other churches that we go visit while we're there for the week. So I'm going into this thing, and I say, my stars. Jose had told us he has no training in architecture, no training in engineering. He prayed about, how do I make this thing structurally sound enough to work? God gave him a vision, and that was the vision he gave him. It's an engineering wonder. It works perfectly. That ceiling, that church, by the way, will hold 1,000 people. That's how big that thing is. Okay, so now, next slide. Blanco and I decided to head down the little roadway. He just poured this concrete not too long before we got there. That is a road for a 3-wheeler to take construction materials down to the building that's going to get built down there at the bottom. Now, I want to be careful with this, and please understand. I went down to that thing. Irma and I came into a windfall earlier this year, and our tithe on it we dedicated to this church. Barry sent it over to this church. That money, along with some other money, paid for that concrete walkway. It was not with pride that I stood there. It was with a sense of unbelievable joy that I stood there and said, oh, Lord, thank you so much that you allowed us to have a little part of doing this. Me and Blanco were praying together. Okay, so I go back to breakfast. Everybody comes back down. Jose is explaining to us this big building they're going to build in there. They're going to create pastors. They're going to train them. They're going to bring them in for months of training. They're going to teach them how to harvest crops, how to cook. But they got to have this huge 2-story building, to do that. He's in the process of talking about it, and I walked over and wanted to give you a feel for the size of it. But the other thing I wanted to give you a feel for was, if you see right there is his house. The land behind his house to the back of the property is 100 yards. He's talking about the fact they've been trying to buy that land for 3 years, and the guy won't sell it to them. And they said, well, we really need this piece of property. That's where we need to grow the crops to teach the pastors how to do that so they can go home and grow food themselves. And then take those crops into the building we're going to build, teach them how to cook it so they can go home and teach the others how to do that. So I told him, I said, Jose, how big is the thing? He said, well, it's pretty deep. And so I just casually asked the question. It was casual. I said, you've been trying to buy it for 3 years. What do you think you have to pay to actually get it? And he sat there for a few moments and he said, $1,500. I said, wow, $1,500. I said, how deep is it? And he said, well, it goes to this tree in here, and that tree back there is 100 yards into the property. This thing is 100 yards that way, 100 yards this way. Do the math on it. It's over 2 acres of land. And I walked over to the edge of it, and I stepped into the jungle, and I'm telling you, God right there on the spot said, Jim, I have blessed you and Irma all your lives. You are to bless this church. You are to pay for this piece of land, and you are to pay to have it cleaned off. And I went, wait a minute, claw hammer and 2 mirrors. And then I said, yes, Lord, I've heard your voice before. I know what you're saying. We'll do it. I walked back over. I said, Jose, how much does it cost to clean the land off? He said, I hired 4 guys with machetes. By the way, Jose's seen the Lord work so many times, I think he even knew what was going on. He said, I can hire 4 guys with machetes, 12 hours a day for a solid week. We can clean off the entire piece of property. I said, Pastor, God just spoke to me. My wife and I are going to give you the money to buy this and to clean it off. We will transfer $1,750 to your account. I said, how quickly can you go buy it? He said, I'll go today, but let me tell you, if I go, I got to put a down payment. And we're going to Iquitos in a few days. If the money's not there and I can't pay this man, I will forfeit the down payment. I said, you got a phone? He said, yeah. On that slab, we called to my house. My wife answered the phone. They said, I want you to see God in the middle of this as I go on. Irma answers the phone. I tell her what happened. I said, honey, I hope you're in accord. She said, did God speak to you? I said, yes, he did. We're in accord. Next day, she went and wrote a check to the church. 2 days later, the money was in the bank in Iquitos. We head back to the house. And it was just Jose and I wanted to go through and see Larry's tool set. So we walk along. This is a planer table he had, and it's a piece of junk. He's built 5 churches and 2 houses with this thing. It's worn out. It's just worn out. I turned to Jose and I said to him, now I wasn't thinking about buying one. I turned to Jose and I said, what would it cost to replace that thing? And he said, well, a good one, $900. I said, U.S. dollars? Yeah, U.S. dollars. I said, oh, okay. So we went along, and here was his table saw. And I touched it and said, well, he could use a new blade on this thing. I went further, and now I went through a series of several tools, and outside of a claw hammer and a chisel, going to the next one, and the next 2, and the next one. That, by the way, is what he used to cut little grooves in the wood. That was a router that he had. I don't know how he did it. That's all he had. And I'm sitting there, and I'm saying, 5 churches, 2 houses. How did he do it? You know what God did? Jim, I want you to buy him a new set of tools. I'm going, wait a minute, $900 plus? I'm going, whoa. So, I kid you not, I walked into the house, I got out a piece of paper, and I started listing what it was going to take. And I made up a complete list. I got through with it. It was $3,000. And I said, boy, this is a lot of money, Lord. He said, Jim, that's what I want you to do. I said, okay. Now, I didn't tell anybody at this moment in time. This was just me and God talking. Then we go on. All of us have a story. This is a couple of slides on mine. That afternoon, things got a little slow. I'm not a person that handles slow very well. I said, Barry, I'm going to boogie around the town. I took my bag of lollipops and I took off. And I go 3 or 4 blocks down the street, if you will, and I come across these adults playing volleyball. Yeah, come on. They didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Spanish. We had a great time. We played volleyball together. I take off again. I go further down the street, and I'm giving lollipops to everybody. Funny story, every little kid got 2 lollipops, and all the big kids were running, grabbing the little brothers and bringing them back so I could give 2 more lollipops to them. I handed this to 2 mothers there, and I said, photo? See? They grab my camera, and they throw the baby in my arms. They take this picture. It was just a delightful moment. If you look real closely, several of those kids are sucking lollipops. Okay, now this takes a few seconds. Saturday arrives. They say, Jim, you can go work on the church with Jose. Hot dog, that's what I came over there to do. I work with Larry, excuse me. So we get out in the backyard on that table saw. We're cutting wood, beams to go. This stuff is hard. It's harder than treated oak. It is hard stuff. And Larry can do stuff with a table saw that I have never seen people do before. Not just ripping wood, but he's an artisan. We carry this stuff down to the thing. I'm carrying 2 of them under my armpits. We get down there. I'm already down. It's 200 yards away. I'm already down to here, drop them, turn around. Here he comes with 4 of them on his shoulders. Now, he's 30 years old. I'm 76 years old. I said, okay. He can handle 4. Anyway, he says, you want to put a nail in? I said, sure. I put a nail in. I bent it. I said, we need to drill a hole. He said, okay. We drilled a hole. I put a nail in. I bent it. Turns out that wood is so hard. It's a trick to driving it that I didn't know. And they knew it ahead of time. Even Jose had laughed a little bit about, we got something to show you. If you hit it as hard as you can, perfect, you can drive the nail through it. Otherwise, if you don't, you bend it. Larry even bent a couple of nails while we were working on this. It's really, really hard stuff. Next slide. Irma made me promise I would not get on any ladders as a 76-year-old. And I told her, okay, I won't do it. I had to get on that ladder. The wood was weighed so much, he couldn't nail it in without me holding up one end. And Terry and Sam come up. Sam's got a camera. I said, Sam, please don't take a picture. Irma will kill me if she sees me up on this ladder. So we get it put in place. And then, while we're ready now to put some wood up, next slide. He says, you want a hammer, you want a saw? Ain't no way I'm going to hammer. I said, I'll saw. And so I'm down there using the saw, cutting that wood, and the saw's not particularly strong. And I looked up at him. I said, Larry, he said, see, you need, he says, oh, see, that's no money. I said, but Larry, you know how to get it. He said, see, you know how, see, you pray to God, God will provide you a saw. And he smiled. What he didn't know is when I did that little deal, God said to me, when you get to Iquitos, you buy him a circular saw. And I'm going, oh, good grief. I mean, and I kid you not. Regrettably, it was kind of like ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. I mean, so we go along with, we're working on this stuff, and something happened that I just have to tell you about. He can do with a chisel in his hand what you and I use a miter saw to do. It's insane what this man can do. He is working up there, and I looked at him. I said, Larry, you need a ching, 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 ching. He said, see. God says, buy him one. And I'm going, oh, boy. I mean, Jiminy. And then the one thing happened, and I want to get real serious here. A moment occurred in time. And it was a moment between he and I don't even know how to describe it to you. I looked up at him, and I said, Pastor Larry. He said, see. I said, never forget, Jesus Cristo was a carpenter. He looked at me, and the look between us, there's no way I can describe it to you. It was just very special. We go inside. Here's our finished product that you see up at the top there. It took, that's what we did, that area right there. It took the 2 of us 5 hours to do that, 5 hours. There are 20 windows in that church. I got to do one of them. If he gets a few more dollars to buy some wood and nails, he can finish it out, but he's going to need a few more dollars to do it. Okay, now, clean up, and I almost wasn't going to show this one. What I didn't tell you earlier is when we were carrying the wood down and I dropped the 2, we went back to get the rest of it, and I said, Pastor Larry, 3. So I carried 3 of them down. I'm being a big guy. So now we're going to clean up, and I'm just not going to be outdone. Stupidest, dumbest thing I have ever done in this entire trip down there. Hey, Pastor Larry, cuatro. He puts 4 of those stupid things on my shoulder. I am trying to get back to the house. 200 yards with that stuff. You know, I just thought of this right now. I think I understand what Christ felt like when he was carrying the cross. Anyway, I get back, I make it back, I drop that stuff on the ground and say, boy, what a stupid thing I did. At the baptism, we got word that the guy had sold him half of the land, but only half. And so Pastor Jose and I went back, and the slide is me standing there with a machete in my hand, with the clothes I was baptized on, with this hat on, and I'm whacking down a tree with that machete. And what we did, we prayed over that land that God would make all of it available, and I was cleaning it off, getting ready for the whole land being made. Now, we go in, oh, by the way, 2 days after we got back to the United States, the man sold us the rest of the land. He responded to that prayer. Okay, now let's fast forward. Let's fast forward to Iquitos. Now by now it has slipped out that God has told me to buy Larry some tools. I did tell Jose and Barry, I said, please don't tell him I'm doing this. I want to surprise him with a shopping trip. Another thing that happened, Barry was going to buy him a real nice power drill, really nice one. But it turned out we didn't have enough money to pay for it. I said, Barry, God's told me I need to put that in my budget. I need to buy him a power drill. So I'm sitting there just shaking my head. I said, I hope Irma buys into this because we're talking about $3,000. So Larry now knows we're going on a shopping trip to buy tools. Now, here's where you need to see God in action. This is a very short window of time. Without God, this could have never occurred. Three-wheelers are the mode of transportation. We jump in one, and we take off to go to the store because that's the traffic we're in. And we're time constrained. We got to catch an airplane to get out of there. We get to the store, and we buy the 2 mirrors for the house. We jump in a three-wheeler. We take them back to the house. We now jump in a three-wheeler. We're going to go buy the big tool. You know, the planer that he needs to replace the $900 machine. It doesn't look like much. It's so heavy it takes 4 people to pick it up. I'm sitting there, no problem. Pull out my Visa card, won't take it. Oh, by the way, there's a big problem. Angela got sick, and Jose couldn't go with us. He was going to be our interpreter. He had to go take Angela to the hospital. And Larry doesn't speak that much English. And these Peruvians at the store didn't speak any English. I pull out the credit card, won't take it. Pull out Discover, they won't take it. They got a sign that says MasterCard. Pull out MasterCard, they won't take it. God has told me to buy these tools. I can't buy them. They won't take my money. What do I do? I said, Larry, call Jose. God. Jose had just gotten back from the hospital. Just got back. He comes rushing over there, walks in the door. We find out they won't take my credit cards because they'll only take Soltis, Peruvian currency, and I was U.S. currency. So Pastor Jose says, plan A fails, let's go to plan B. We jump in a three-wheeler, we go to the bank. The bank's going to give us $1,350. We get to the bank, get in the queue, wait, time is clicking. You know, we got to catch an airplane. Time is clicking. The bank says, yeah, we'll give you money, maximum $300 per day. I need $1,350. Won't work. Jose says, plan B fails. Let's go to plan C. What's plan C? Jump in a three-wheeler, go back to the hotel. He goes down to Carla, his wife. He comes out with $1,350 American money cash that he needed the next day to go on a 2-week vacation, and he had to have some work done on his eyes. He had to have that money. I said, Pastor, he said, Jim, it's the only way you can pay for it. He calls his money guy over. He comes over. There was a downturn in the exchange in the week we were there. I got less Soltis for the $1,350 I thought I was going to get. I'm sitting there counting it up, and I said, I can't buy everything that I was going to buy. So turns out the hardware store, which sold the little stuff, was going to close real soon. I said, Larry, let's go there. We buy him a circular saw, we buy him the drill, we buy him the router saw, we buy him a blade, and we said, hot dog, let's go get the big stuff. We jump in and go over to the big stuff. Kid you not, we get in there, he turns to me, and he says, he can explain this. He said, it's electric, but it will draw on my generator awfully hard. I really need this gasoline engine to drive it right. And I remember seeing one at his shop back there. I said, okay, no problem. What does it cost? $100. And I'm saying, uh-oh, this doesn't work. There's not enough here. I said, Father, I don't know what to do. And I said, Larry, go get the engine and bring it and put it down here next to this thing, and let's ask them for a price. We did that. Guess what? When we were there 2 hours earlier, they had overpriced the big machine. When we put the little one next to it, they gave us a dual discount. I not only paid for it, I had 260 Soltis left in my hand. And I said, Larry, let's go back to the hardware store. We jump in a three-wheeler, we go running back. I kid you not, they were locking the door of the store. We pleaded with them. They opened it up. They let him in, and it was like a kid in a candy store. He bought a claw hammer, a big heavy hammer, a really nice hacksaw with 2 extra blades, a crescent wrench needle nose plier set, a heavy-duty tin snips, 3 large C-claps, a drill bit set with 16 bits. He only had 3. A brand new standard size saw, a set of 2 small hand saws, and a Peruvian tape measure. And the next slide. The next slide is us headed back to the hotel, him carrying about 50 pounds of tools in this box. We get back to the hotel, and the first thing that happens is Jose and Larry and I sit down, and Jose says a prayer of thanks, not for what I had done, a thanks of what God had done. And I can't tell you what that felt like. Now, I want to leave you with this. Let me come back to what I read to you a minute ago. Which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. This church sponsors that church. That $3,000, those tools are going to be used to build churches all over that area. All over that area. He needs to build a building. It's going to cost $100,000. I believe we have the ability. I believe we have the ability within this church to build that building. I believe that. I believe if God lays it on our hearts, if he gives you the opportunity to participate, you can participate. I believe we can finish those other 19 windows. I sincerely believe that. And I tell you, I'm scared to death. I'm waiting to see what God's going to tell Irma and I, and I'm scared to death what he might say. But I just want to leave that with you. I believe in this church we can do that. You'll notice in this video that I'm not dressed like I was when I gave my testimony in church. There was an extremely important movement of God on that last day that in my excitement I left out. And I just felt it was so important that I needed to come back and share it with you. At the hotel, when Pastor Jose and I were talking about executing Plan C, and he handed me the $1,300, he had told me that that was money that he and his wife Clara had set aside to go on a 2-week vacation trip starting the next day. And on that trip, he was actually going to have a medical procedure done on his eyes, and he needed that money to pay for the procedure. I told him, I said, Pastor, I don't know if I can take this money. And he said, no, Jim, it's too important. You take this. We will postpone our trip until such time as you can get the money back to us here in Iquitos. I looked at him, and we did this down on the pad earlier in the week. I said, Pastor, get your phone out. Let's call my wife. Irma doesn't normally, is not normally at home in the 11:30 hour of the day because she has many, many things she does. She's usually gone. That day, now watch God in this. That day she was home, and she answered the phone. I explained to her exactly what had happened and exactly what was going on. And she said, fine, that she would get the money transferred as quickly as possible. Now, there are only 2 people in our church that can transfer funds on wire transfer. And one of them, Terry Thompson, was on the trip with me. The only other person was Mary Davis. Mary was packing her house, moving to a new home. Irma was able to get through to her. Somehow she answered the phone. They spoke. And because Mary had transferred money earlier in the week for the other commitment that God had laid on my heart, it was it was a simple matter for her to call the bank, and they transferred the money immediately, and it was deposited into Pastor Jose's account the next morning. He did not have to postpone his trip, and we had the funds that we needed. And if God had not been in the middle of that, that simply could not have happened. You think about just the business economy of the day. Transferring that kind of money with that short notice, it just doesn't happen. But you know, God was at work in the middle of this, and what I learned is that nothing is impossible when God is at work.